Hello, everybody. Welcome to this short video where we're going to be discussing some of the differences between the old school standalone Dynamics 365 for HR implementation that you're probably familiar with, and how some of the functionality is going to look as we move to integrating the HR functionality into the wider Dynamics for Finance and Operations platform. There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years around how we're going to merge some of the functionality and how we're going to bring the two systems together. There are certain visual differences that this video is going to highlight. So I'll talk you through how some of the high level changes are going to look, how they'll affect you, how you can navigate the new system. And then we can talk about some of the pros and cons and some of the advantages of making the move to finance and operations via HR processes. So without further ado, let's jump in. So if we look at the system that I've got here, this is good old-fashioned D365 for HR. As you can see, I'm on my homepage. I've got all of my HR specific modules here. And on the left-hand side, I've got all of the modules on the hamburger menu. If we jump over to Finance and Operations, you'll see on the homepage here, because I'm looking at this as a system administrator, you can see the first thing right out of the box is there's a hell of a lot more information on the screen here. So Finance and Operations at its core is what's called an ERP system, which means Enterprise Resource Planning. This means that finance and operations covers just about every process in any large organization, and that'll cover everything from HR to the creation of purchase orders, invoicing customers, manufacturing, any procurement processes, fixed assets, and then finally all of your financial information. So it can look very, very daunting. Now, what's happened post-merge, if I open up my little hamburger menu on the left-hand side, you'll see that in our modules list over here, instead of just seeing our HR specific stuff that we saw in the HR standalone environment, obviously in here, we've got everything to do with every function an organization would need. Within this list, we can obviously see HR has its own home in this list. So if I click on this button here, this is going to open up the HR module. So this is going to be your second big difference. Whereas, again, in standalone HR, every single module had its own section. Within standalone finance and operations, as you can see here, everything's covered under the HR module. So whether it's leave and absence, personnel management, compensation management, they don't have their own modules. They're all covered under the same banner here. The exception to this being good old leave and absence, which has just been added this year as part of the new functionality for the merge. So the reality here is, if you're kind of brand new to finance and operations and you've been using the standalone HR system for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and however long, the biggest change you're going to notice is everything now is covered under a module. The good news for this is there will be security in place within finance and operations. So the likelihood is, if you're a HR administrator, you're not going to be able to see every single module in this list. You'll probably only be able to see HR, and maybe if you're required to create purchase orders and that sort of thing, you might have visibility of that as well. On the flip side, anything in the HR module, whether it's personal information, leave and absence information, compensation information, is all still stored under this. It can't be accessed by anybody that doesn't have human resources permissions. So everything is secure. Security is a big part of finance and operations, in the same way that we obviously don't want general ledger and accounting information being publicly available to any employee that walks through the door. The same goes for your HR data. It's locked up, safe, so that only HR administrators can see it. Okay. There is an additional tool to make your lives a little bit easier within finance and ops, and that is the inclusion of something called Workspaces. So obviously we can see everything to do with HR in here. So pretty much everything's controlled under the one roof, whether it's compensation, benefits, all of the setup relating to the module as well. It can be a little bit daunting, and it can make it slightly difficult if you need to find a specific form or a specific set of data. So because of this, Microsoft have added in what's called the Workspaces function. So each of your high-level modules, whether it's employee development, personnel management, compensation management, these have all been added into a specific workspace for you. And as that loads, you'll see the workspaces basically look pretty much exactly the same as they did within standalone HR. So for example, in the HR section, compensation management, the module will give us the view that we want to see here. Okay. So if you think about it, basically that your workspaces are the individual modules from the HR section. What we can also do, again, if I open my hamburger menu, we've got a workspaces list here. And again, this is showing me every workspace in the organization. So there's a bunch of things in here to do with finance specific things, purchasing specific things, anything that you may need to run your business, it's in here. But we have the ability to favorite things. So when you highlight anything, whether it's data management or compensation, you can click the star and this will add it to your favorites. And your favorites are always up at the top of the form here. So anything that you commonly use or commonly access, this can go for workspaces or even specific grid views, like say all positions here or employees. You can add them to a favorite so you can easily access them. So you don't need to open up your drop down list, go and find HR and then go and find the workspace that you need every single time. You can just click on your favorites and then go straight into whichever form that you need to access. So overall navigation has a slight change. Aesthetically, it looks basically the same. It's just ever so slightly bigger. You can obviously do certain things like make your wording bigger and increase your font size and that sort of thing. That's all part and parcel of the box, the same as it was in good old HR. Next thing that's going to be changing for you is going to be some of the layouts of the forms. So if we use compensation management as an example, Microsoft have made the change a little bit easier for us. So they've actually changed some of the formatting of a lot of the modules already in time for the merges, so that you're aware that some of the form changes have already taken effect, so you know where to find things. Big thing to bear in mind, if we look at our compensation management module, you'll obviously be aware that you've got your summary table, and that'll give you some high level fields, some compensation plan information, and a little bit of analysis. If you want to get into any of the setup of that particular module, whether it's compensation management or personnel management, you always have to click in links here. And this will give you everything to do with the setup. So whether it's your reference points, your plans themselves, and what have you. If we jump back to finance and operations, and again, we'll go to my compensation management workspace. You'll notice here, right out of the gate, that our links tab is not there. Okay, and this is by design. So we've sacked off having the links tab in finance and operations, and instead, at the bottom of your summary page, you'll see that all of your setup information is right there at the bottom of the screen. So it's much easier to just scroll down and jump into whichever section that you need to access. Analytics are still there. Within finance and operations, you've got some additional analytical powers, so you can build reports on data that's in the system. You can also add in your own custom Power BI reports as an applet if you want to do as well. But we'll cover some of the additional functionality that you can get your hands on later in the video. Last but not least on the changes, if we look at our employee self-service portal, again, there were some minor changes originally. However, Microsoft have mirrored these changes in some of the setup that we have within standalone HR. So previously, we used to have a horizontal slider to get over to some of our additional information for our employee self-service portal. However, everything now is down at the footer. Now, if you're on an updated or more recent version of HR, you'll notice that Microsoft have made this change already. So the change that your employees will see when they access their employee self-service post-merge won't really cause them any problems. The only benefit to this will be your employees will now be able to book leave, update personal information, and approve workflows in the same place that they do their regular job. So it makes the employee experience a little bit more streamlined and fluid. Same goes for your manager self-service portal. Again, there are some tiny changes, but for the most part, everything's pretty much exactly the same. And if I just jump into standalone HR and we go to our employee self-service, you can see the same thing. So all of the work items assigned, company directory and absence calendar information still there. And we've still got all the information on our team here as well. The only addition that you've got within the setup here is we've obviously got the addition of things like timesheets and expenses. These are part of finance and operations that can be set up by your finance team, and your employees can then utilize those in the employee self-service portal if you want to do. Now, those are going to be your visual changes, and this will be the same for every module, whether it's personnel management, leave, employee development, compensation management. There are slight visual changes like that. I've pretty much covered everything that you're going to see as far as visual changes go. There are going to be some functionality changes and some rules that HR are going to need to comply with after we merge and become a finance and operations platform. So if we jump back to old school HR for a second, if you've done an implementation and you're running live with kind of standalone HR at the moment, you'll know that normally it's up to HR to do things like create legal entities and create financial dimensions. Within finance and operations, the easiest way to put it is HR will need to comply with the wider business much more. So because there are knock-on effects with legal entities and financial dimensions, these will be controlled by finance. Okay, so it's not going to be something that will sit under the banner of HR anymore. Reason for that being, if you create a legal entity within finance and operations, there are financial or there is financial setup required basically in the background. So that'll be things like chart of accounts and basic accounting data that'll need to be applied to the legal entity before you guys as HR can employ people in that legal entity. So the overall management of your legal entities is going to be controlled by finance. Same goes for your financial dimensions. Again, those will be picked up by finance and managed by the finance department. You'll still be able to use and switch between legal entities and enroll people in legal entities and do anything else that you may need to do with assigning financial dimensions normally, but the overall creation and management of them will sit with finance. The other thing to bear in mind, again, we'll jump back to standalone HR, some of the system admin functions. So the creation of user records and some of the assignment of permissions, that will likely have to fall into the wider umbrella of your IT department. Again, reason for that being, when we're looking at finance and operations, we're not just looking at HR data. So if somebody, say, has system admin permissions within the HR environment here, great, it means I can see all of the HR data that I need to do. It means I can see everything to do with leave, benefits, compensation, you name it. If somebody's got system admin permissions within finance and operations here, this means that they can see every asset in the organization, every bit of cash and bank transactions, every bit of financial information that the company has. So some of the security permissions will have to be controlled by finance. All of your HR specific permissions will still stand, and you'll still have your HR access. And as I say earlier, that'll be kind of hidden from view. So employees won't be able to get into any compensation plan information or any personal information of other employees. But it's something to be aware of. The plus side to these changes is, for example, the HR department can be better utilized within the wider platform. Really good example of this is going to be the position hierarchy here. So if I look at the position hierarchy, and let's look at, say, Tim Ball here, who's an IT manager. Obviously, if you've implemented leave previously, you'll know that we can utilize the position hierarchy here for things like workflow approvals. What we can do within finance and operations, we can use our positional hierarchy for other workflows as well. So let's say if you've got a purchase order approval process, we can utilize the positional hierarchy so that Tim's purchase orders always go to Sarah for approval because it's his line manager. What we can also do is utilize certain budgetary requirements. So within finance and operations, you can set up approval limits for different things, such as job types. So if we say, look at the job type of IT manager, we can put an approval limit on this job. So we can utilize some of the HR hierarchy data to say, okay, if someone has the job of an IT manager, they can approve up to 100,000 euros of a purchase order. If it's more than that, it has to go up to a different job level and so on. So a lot of the data that HR holds now can be really easily utilized in the wider organization. And there's a lot of benefits to having that HR data in finance and operations with the rest of the organization. So that kind of brings me on to the final section, which is going to be how we deal with the pros and cons. So obviously there's a big pro in what I've just talked about in how we can utilize some of the hierarchy information. The other big pro that we're dealing with here is how we can sort of customize the system. Now, again, if you've done an implementation of old school HR, as we'll call it here, you'll know that we've always been very, very limited about what we can and can't customize within the system. Standalone HR has always been what we call black box functionality, so it's uneditable. Other than creating a custom field or hiding fields that aren't required or moving forms around and that sort of thing, we were always limited functionality wise. Because we are now migrating to finance and operations, a lot of the possibilities for development and customization have been greatly improved. So we can actually add our own code now if required. We don't have to be as tied into utilizing Power Apps if we don't need to be. So a lot of the customization functionality that's now in finance and operations makes customization and additional requirements from yourselves much more easy to kind of bring to fruition, really. So those are your two pros. The only real con that you're going to have to deal with finance operations is, as I said at the start, it is a very, very big system. And again, I want to stress that in this training session, we're looking at this from a system admin point of view. So if you're just a HR administrator or a HR manager, you are not going to have this massive amount of data meeting you every time you log in. The security has been drilled down and set up so that we can carry any permissions you've got in standalone HR and apply them directly in finance and operations as well. So we can drill down and customize your experience as much as humanly possible. That kind of brings the training or the overview training to an end. If you do have any questions about any of the topics we've covered in this video, or you'd like any more information, please don't hesitate to contact us, either in the comments or directly through the FourVision website, LinkedIn. Contact your consultant or salesperson. Yeah, if you need us at all, we are there to kind of guide you through the migration process as you move from standalone to finance and operations. But anyway, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.